Hey, Stux here. Today I'm going to answer some more questions from the hashtag AskStuxAnything channel from my Discord. If you want to ask your own questions, simply join the Discord down in the description, or if you're interested in talking to me privately, you can head over to iostux.com. Now the first question that I'd like to go over is sent in by Wiz, and he asks, who would you pick as the greatest Overwatch player of all time, including pre-owl days? If you think it's too difficult to pick a best player, then which player do you think has had the best career? So proper careers don't actually exist yet. The Overwatch League really is still in its infancy. We're currently in the second season, it's about to end, we're soon to start with a third. 2 years is very short, so the only players that really have a career to speak of are players that have been in the scene for a very, very long time. So some of the old Envy players and most of the players that have been in Apex, you could say that they had a career, but a lot of the players that are fresh haven't really had a true career yet. I'd say that until, around stage 4, season 4 rather, and season 5 of the Overwatch League, calling a player, a player's history an actual career is a little bit of a stretch. Now, that said, I can explain on what I would look for in order to determine whether a player is good or not. Obviously, skill overall is one of the main indicators if a player performs very, very well in his games. Taking into account the situation, right? So if it's a very good team with very good results playing against a bad team and he rolls the other team, then that doesn't necessarily mean a lot. But assuming that he plays well against teams of a similar skill level, that's something to take into account. Another thing to take into account is how their overall personality and attitude are. If they're a very positive player, if they have strong leadership abilities, that is very important to know. Whereas if the player is known for being toxic and difficult to work with, then that's something that we need to obviously, reduce their points for. One important trait to look for that a lot of people aren't quite aware of is actually how adaptable the players are. So if a new meta comes around, or if they're forced to learn a new character, certain players crumble because they can't adapt and they can't learn the new character or they can't adjust to it. Whereas some other players, they switch to the new character and then over 1 or 2 matches, they're doing quite well on those characters. This obviously also depends a little bit on coaching, but as I mentioned, as we get into later seasons of the Overwatch League, it is going to be easier to tell the impact that a coach had from the impact that a player. In terms of their career, it also matters whether they actually went up or down the ladder. So if they had a very long career, they're going to be on multiple teams, or maybe they're going to stay on one team. If they're a player that is on a very, very bad team and they don't really stay with that team very long and then they move on to another bad team that is not as good as a player that is on a bad team and then starts moving on to better teams, or a player that starts out on a very good team but actually stays with that team for multiple years. So Arcane's question is, as a player with school, how many hours should I put into competitive every day to improve at a steady pace to the point where, let's say, I could join a Diamond to Master team, already averaging low to mid Diamond every end of season? So Diamond to Master teams don't actually invest a lot of time into the game, so you don't need to play the game more in order to join one of them. The average that I am aware of players around that skill level forming teams is maybe 3 scrims a week. Now, if you already average low to Diamond, you can just join a team already. There is no real need to wait. Again, assuming that you can find a team that you actually get along well with. Now, the more interesting question is playtime. My personal recommendation is 15 hours a week at a very minimum. That is a skill, that is a amount of time where someone should be able to reach an accurate skill rating, although it is always going to lag behind a little. But by the end of the season, someone playing 15 hours a week can't really blame the amount of time that they put into the game for their rating being inaccurate. If you play 15 hours a week and at the end of the season you're a Diamond player. Now, when we get into higher numbers, I generally recommend going into the 20s to 25. This is for more dedicated players that want to reach the top of the ladder and really get into GM top 500. That said, past 25 hours, you start facing diminishing returns where you're going to burn out, and overall the practice isn't going to be as efficient per hour added compared to lower playtimes. Going from 15 hours to say 17 hours makes a much bigger difference than going from 25 hours to say 28, 29 hours. Right. Now, where playing more than 25 hours becomes a requirement and becomes very beneficial is if you use that additional time to play with a team, right? So if you play, say, 4 hours with a team and then 2 hours of competitive, you can go well past the 25 hours recommended. However, spending time with a team is a lot more productive. So Gwags was asking, what do you think makes a meta fun for players and observers, and what do you think Overwatch has to do to recapture it? So generally, when looking at the enjoyment of a singular meta, we are looking at variety, impact, and how dynamic the meta is. So obviously in terms of variety, if you're just playing the same comp over and over and over again, that is neither fun to play nor very fun to watch. In terms of impact, this refers to how much a player can carry or how much they can pop off and end up on the Reddit front page with some really great plays. Or with other compositions, they might feel less impactful, where they feel like the outcome of the game is out of their control, or they can't actually show off their skills. And dynamicness refers to how each team fight differs from the next one. So whether you're doing the same thing every single fight, or if you have to really adapt, look at each situation, and then completely change your play style based on that situation. Those are really the three main things to look for when evaluating whether a meta is fun for players and fun for observers. Now let's take two examples. Goats, which is probably one of the least fun metas to watch, and at the start one of the least fun to play, and Dive, which is the exact opposite. So Goats, especially at its start, didn't have a lot of variety. People just ran regular Goats with a Moira. Eventually they played Zen Goats, and then later on in the life cycle, people started playing Mei Goats, Sombra Goats, Winston Goats, etc. Now, in terms of impact, certain characters like Brigitte, for example, even though they were quite impactful and a good Brigitte player made a huge difference, to the player and to the observer, they felt a little bit weak, right? They can't really go in and get a quad Dragon Blade like a Genji could. So even though they are impactful, they don't actually feel impactful to either the player or the observer. And in terms of dynamicness, this again depends on the situation, but on most maps and in most matchups, Goats was essentially just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and you didn't really have to play very dynamically, you didn't have to react to a lot of things, and most fights in terms of planning were essentially the same. You could write a flowchart that would cover the decision-making process for 99% of Goats versus Goats fights. Now, Dive, on the other hand, has a lot of variety. You have Tracer Genji Dive, you have Hackfist, you have Pharah dive comps, right? You even have Widow dive comps. Widow Tracer was pretty popular at a time, right? So there's a lot of variety in the comps. In terms of impact, every single character has very high impact. They can all make plays that really can define the outcome of a game, and all of them can end up on Reddit, be it some huge Lucio Boop, some weird Dragon Blade, a huge Primal, a huge Diva Bomb, etc. And in terms of dynamicness, because of all of these different matchups, you pretty much always had a different game depending on the team's strengths. And also, every single fight played very, very differently based on the map you were on, based on what ultimates people had, based on what ultimates the enemy team had, based on the specific part where you played the map, based on the play style that you were trying to go for. So even though teams were playing nothing but Dive over and over and over again, it actually felt fresh because of all the variations and because of how different it felt on all of the maps and different game modes. Alright, that does it for this video. If you're interested in following me on Twitter, joining the Discord, or checking out my coaching, you can find the links for that in the description. I'd also really like it if you could press on the subscribe button if you want to see more of these videos, and click on the little bell icon in order to be notified every time that I upload a new video. My name is Stux, and I'd like to thank you for learning.